advised Arjuna to regulate the senses from the very beginning so that he could curb the greatest sinful enemy, lust, which destroys the urge for self-realization and the specific knowledge of the self. So the information that we get through the Gyan, it awakens the urge for self-realization. Like, that's the impact of the Gyan, right? It's not that the Gyan is like not very, very significant. It is very, very significant. We hear through the hearing that urge becomes kindled, that natural urge. I mean, Prabhupada's saying it here as if this is the truth for everybody. Like, there's an urge for self-realization there. And that is the case. Of course, it's the case, because we're spiritual beings. Every single person, be they in Krishna consciousness or not, there's some urge inside for true self-realization and specific knowledge of the self. But that becomes deviated, or here Prabhupada uses the word destroys the urge, because there's competing urges. There's other urges that replace the urge and become more prominent than that underlying urge for self-realization, the urge of the senses. And how did that happen? It's because lust, of course, captured strategic places so that it could, so that the lust kind of makes other urges prominent because it's captured the specific. That's what's strategic about it, is that because lust becomes manifest in these places, it subverts the urge for self-realization, replaces it with other urges. And this is something that is discussed at length in the first text of the Nectar of Instruction. I thought it'd be interesting to go there for a minute. Let me pull up the Nectar of Instruction. First verse of the Nectar of Instruction. And these are different. Prabhupada, of course, quoted this verse much. It's a very important verse. And here is described other urges that cause a problem for us. They're like urges that supersede other urges that are in our best interest because of being impelled by lust. So here is the verse. Vacho vegam manasakroda vegam, jiva vegam udarapasta vegam, etan vegan yog vishaheta dira, sarvam apimam prithivim sashishyat. A sober person who can tolerate the urge to speak, the mind's demands. So first of all, we can tolerate some of our urge to speak. We can tolerate the demands of the mind, the actions of anger, and the urges of the tongue, the belly, and the genitals. 6 right there, 6 urges. If someone can tolerate these 6 urges, they're qualified to make disciples all over the world. That's how significant an accomplishment this is. I'll read it again. A sober person who can tolerate the urge to speak, the mind's demands, the actions of anger, and the urges of the tongue, belly, and genitals is qualified to make disciples all over the world. So here in the purport, actually it's quite a lengthy purport. We won't read it tonight. If I just scroll through it, you can see quickly it's very, very long. So Prabhupada goes through, it's an excellent purport. I would recommend reading it, but it goes through each of these particular urges. Prabhupada discusses them at some length here. But I thought it was quite interesting how Prabhupada opens up in the purport. And how, I mean, it's hard to conceive of how intimately Srila Prabhupada, sometimes it's astounding that Prabhupada can just, Prabhupada didn't only just do it in literature, but also in classes. But keep in mind, when Prabhupada was doing these translations, we know that he was doing it by the dictaphone, right? So he'd basically be having the verse, and in the case of the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam, he would have the commentaries of the other acharyas beside him, and he would basically be synthesizing the commentary of the acharyas, synthesizing like their commentaries, along with his own ability to apply it according to time, place, and circumstances. It's quite amazing, and all this was happening as he was holding a dictaphone. And Prabhupada would just speak into the dictaphone, and those recordings would be then taken and then typed out into his books. I mean, like, it's amazing. I hope you don't mind if I go on this little tangent, but I was just kind of like having a moment of appreciation for Srila Prabhupada's amazing empowerment. I mean, sometimes if I'm just writing a simple text to somebody, I have to sit down and rewrite it about 3 times to make sure it comes out right. Prabhupada is like basically dictating Shastra, which is just taken and then typed out, and here it is. It's like he was simply so much of this knowledge flowed from him so naturally, and so I hope that wasn't a distraction. What I just wanted to appreciate Prabhupada a little bit here, but just to get back to the point, this verse about these different urges, Prabhupada's going to begin unpacking this verse, and he starts with the Srimad Bhagavatam. In the 6th canto, chapter 1, Parikshit Maharaj placed a number of intelligent questions before Sukadeva Goswami. One of these questions was, why do people undergo atonement if they cannot control their senses? So now this is kind of the same place that we're at with in the Bhagavad Gita. Let me just go to this verse. I hope that you'll appreciate the 5th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Maharaj Parikshit is a little bit disturbed because the 5th canto, in terms of the book, the last chapter, it ends with a description of the hellish planets. And it's a really rough read. Like, if you've read the 5th canto, the last chapter is pretty intense. Like, all the different places that a person goes, and a list of, there's some, if you do this, you go to this hellish place where this happens. And, it's only a few small pieces of description. It's not describing the entire region of hellish planets. Sukadeva Goswami is just giving Parikshit Maharaj an idea about what happens to the souls that have to go to these places to suffer because of their sinful reactions. And so after Maharaj Parikshit hears this, he is, out of compassion, the 6th canto opens up with Parikshit Maharaj asking Sukadeva Goswami, is basically saying, like, how is it possible for all of the living entities to avoid suffering in this way? He's feeling pained because, like, it's really it's hell. Okay, it's like a hellish planet. So there's like, there actually is some artwork depicting some of it too. And so he's just disturbed, thinking, why should people suffer in this way? And of course, that's the quality of the Vaishnava. He's immediately thinking, how can people get freed from this kind of suffering? And so Sukadeva Goswami says to him that, well, if before a person ends their life, if they're able to atone, prayaschita is the Sanskrit word, if they're able to atone for, and that's the word right here in the verse. He's going to question this word. If they're able to make some atonement for what they've done, then it's okay. They can counteract their hellish, or they can counteract their sinful activity, and then they can move on. They don't have to go down there. But then Parikshit Maharaj, he he's not satisfied by that answer. And in fact, it was Sukadeva Goswami was testing Parikshit Maharaj to see how he would respond to that kind of an answer. Because, so here's the verse. Here's Parikshit Maharaj's response to Sukadeva Goswami, who answers with, they just have to do some atonement, and then they can counteract their sinful activities. And so that's the answer that Maharaj Parikshit got to his question. How can these people get freed from their suffering? Now, Parikshit Maharaj is not happy with that, so here's his response. One may know that sinful activity is injurious for him because he actually sees that a criminal is punished by the government and rebuked by people in general, and because he hears from scriptures and learned scholars that one is thrown into hellish conditions in the next life for committing sinful acts. Nevertheless, in spite of such knowledge, one is forced to commit sins again and again, even after performing acts of atonement. Therefore, what is the value of such atonement? So I'm going to read it again. And basically the point is that he's saying that even if a person sees a criminal getting punished by the government, or if somebody is somehow chastised or rebuked in general, even if one hears from the scriptures about how one should avoid sinful activity, still a person will commit sinful acts despite all of that. So go ahead and do all that atonement, but that atonement will not stop the person from again going back and performing sinful acts, because otherwise they wouldn't have done it in the first place. All the information is there, and atonement doesn't seem to help them, actually get free from the activity that causes them to enter into hellish conditions in the first place. So he says, nevertheless, in spite of such knowledge, one is forced to commit sins again and again, even after performing acts of atonement. Therefore, what is the value of such atonement? You see the parallel here to where we are in the Bhagavad Gita? Parikshit's question is almost identical to Arjuna's question. I'll read it one more time. One may know that sinful activity is injurious for him because he actually sees that a criminal is punished by the government and rebuked by people in general, and because he hears from scriptures and learned scholars that one is thrown into hellish conditions in the next life for committing sinful acts. Nevertheless, and here is where we're at in the Bhagavad Gita, in spite of such knowledge, one is forced to commit sins again and again, even after performing acts of atonement. Therefore, what is the value of such atonement? So he's saying here, his question is, just like Arjuna, how is it that one can become freed from this force?
819 Srimad Bhagavatam.
Like this force that's there. This is significant, that we've got in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna focusing on this exact same point, Parikshit Maharaj, the sixth canto, focusing on this exact same point, that despite whatever knowledge one might have, and we pointed out, right, like last time when we were discussing this, that all of the teachings of Dharma that Krishna was imparting to Arjuna, they were not suddenly new information for Arjuna. If anybody on the planet knew Dharma, it was the brother of Dharmaraj, right? Yudhisthira was Dharmaraj himself. And so here he finds himself on the Bhagavad Gita, on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, hearing pretty basic instructions about Dharma that is would have been taken as fairly common knowledge amongst people at that time. And he's questioning himself. Why am I being forced to act, even though I don't want to act this way, why am I being forced? And Parikshit Maharaj is here pointing to the same thing. People are being forced. What's the actual way to get free from this situation? I think it's so significant that they're both focused on this. So, in this purport, Prabhupada talks here about it's a really good purport. I don't want to read the whole thing because oh, wait a minute. This is the Bhagavad. Yeah. Let's see here. What's the next verse? Okay, let's go back to nectar of instruction. Okay, wait a minute. Sorry to lose the flow here. Bear with me. There we are, back to the nectar of instruction. So see where we went here, right? We went from Bhagavad Gita over to the nectar of instruction here, because in the Bhagavad Gita, the verse is talking about these urges. In fact, Prabhupada's talking about it in the purport how the urge for self-realization becomes diminished. Why? Because these other urges, which are impelled by lust, are augmented. Lust augments these other kinds of urges. And to get a grip on this, Prabhupada turns to the Srimad Bhagavatam, the sixth canto, the situation with Parikshit, and focuses on his question. Why do people even undergo atonement if they can't control their senses? And so here, Prabhupada gives more specific examples, elaborate examples about how this is so. A thief may know perfectly well that he may be arrested for his stealing, and he may actually even see a thief arrested by the police, yet he continues to steal. Experience is gathered by hearing and seeing. One who is less intelligent gathers experience by seeing, and one who is more intelligent gathers experience by hearing. So one person might hear, but their real lesson comes when they see someone getting punished. If such a person hears from the scripture and that doesn't register enough for them to impede their behavior, but when they see someone else being punished, okay, I have heard now and I've seen. But a more intelligent person will just hear. So a less intelligent person may first have to be arrested. So Prabhupada gives a whole example here. If punishment in jail is considered atonement, what is the benefit of such atonement? Why is the question there? The question is because even with this atonement, still a person will be forced to act. It doesn't matter even if they're punished. So the root of the question is, like, what is the urge behind the whole thing? What is the force? What is forcing the soul to do these things? So here in the verse, these urges, the urge to speak, so I'm trying to make these connections. So these urges are the things that become prominent. If we can't control our speaking, then it's a problem. We can say sometimes, I'm sure we've had that experience, that after we've said something, maybe we've regretted it. Most people probably had that. The mind's demands, the mind can cause us to act and behave in so many ways, and often really the senses are the root of selfishness. It's basically based on the immediate sensory experience of that the senses are craving for. And so if the mind is ruled by that, then we're simply going to be propelled towards selfish actions of gratification, one after another. And the list goes on. The actions of anger, the urges of the tongue, belly, and genitals. So these are the things that are the result of, lust having actually captured us, and now causing us to be subjugated by these 6 different areas. I'm going to go back to the Bhagavad Gita. I'm going to stop speaking in a minute. There's just a few more things I wanted to cover from this verse. Okay, so we've talked about, how there's a difference between jnana and vijnana. Jnana is the knowledge, and then there's a knowledge of, in particular, a process to apply. So that we can liberate ourselves from the lust, from being captured by the lust, and that process, if we apply it and we actually get freed from from the urges of the senses, the mind, the speech, the etc. What we just read about the nectar of instruction. Then that will be that the process will help subdue those other urges, and the urge for self-realization will once again rise. And that urge for self-realization, along with applying jnana, meaning applying the process, it yields vijnana. And vijnana, then one actually not only just understands the situation of the body and the self, the difference and the difference between, acting with lust and acting with actual spiritual intelligence, but the vijnana includes a real substantial connection with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. The realization manifests through the practice, through our sadhana, through the practice of the process. Krishna gradually becomes more revealed as actual personality in our relationship with him. And without that jnana and the application of the jnana to the process of bhakti, and then that process of bhakti yielding vijnana realization, then there's no way to, there's no other process that will alleviate the situation, which was Parikshit Maharaj's point, is that there has to be something that will ultimately truly free us from the grip of this force of lust. And it's not atonement. It's got to be something else that will just root out the desire for anything else that is contrary to our best interest. And that's what's being described here. This gyan, maturing into vijnana, to the process of bhakti, maturing into an understanding of our relationship with the Supreme Soul. And Prabhupada finishes it off in a beautiful way. Lust is only the perverted reflection of love of God, which is natural for every living entity. Love of God is natural for every living entity, and that natural love is just temporarily manifesting as lust because of the problem that we've been analyzing. But if one is educated in Krishna consciousness from the very beginning, that natural love of God cannot deteriorate into lust. But he's going to say something else. When love of God deteriorates into lust, it is very difficult to return to the normal conditions. See, this is the same point that Parikshit Maharaj was basically questioning as well. Nonetheless, Krishna consciousness is so powerful that even a late beginner, see, here it's Prabhupada is saying that if one happens to be so fortunate that one is educated in this way from the very beginning of life, then you're good, because that's not, you're not going to fall prey to lust. If one from the very beginning is properly educated, proper jnana with the process of bhakti, and one is able to apply it from an early stage of life, one naturally develops vijnana and connection with Lord Krishna. I have an understanding of our relationship with him, and then there's no lust isn't going to manifest in that situation. But no worries if that wasn't our fate, that we didn't kind of contact it with it, from the very beginning. Even a late beginner can become a lover of God by doing this exact same process, even a late beginner. So at any stage of life, be it at the beginning, be it in youth, be it in middle age, be it in old age, any stage of life, the critical thing is from the time of understanding its urgency. When the urge, where was that? The urge for self-realization has once again surfaced. That urge gives us a sense of urgency, right? You can see the word urge is right in there. Urge is in the word urgency. One can begin regulating the senses in Krishna consciousness. We can begin at any time. The important thing is to understand the urgency. So here Arjuna understood the urgency because he could see his situation. He became aware of his situation. It was certainly urgent. He was about to engage in in the Battle of Kurukshetra, and he was bewildered. I mean, that's a very urgent situation. He had to clear up. Parikshit Maharaj felt the urgency as well. The urgency for him in that situation was he felt urgent compassion for trying to understand how exactly we can get free from propelling ourselves towards hellish conditions, life after life. Or at least breaking from the cycle, even if we're able to somehow rebound through some prayaschita, atonement, and project ourselves somewhere else that's more enjoyable, we still haven't escaped the cycle, and we're going to end up in that hellish situation anyway. So he was questioning this and seeing how urgent it was because the suffering is so intense, and he felt compassion. All of that lust is actually originally love, and with the direct and simple process of bhakti, it can easily be transformed back into love at any stage of life. And Prabhupada ends the highest perfectional stage of human life. Prabhupada's purports are sometimes like music, sometimes it starts off, it has some closure to it, it has a beginning, kind of arcs, and there's a closure here. Prabhupada, there's so much poetry and beauty in Prabhupada's writings. Prabhupada here kind of closes in this beautiful, very hopeful way that it's accessible to each and every one of us. There's no limitation. Doesn't matter our age or whatever the case may be. So I will stop there. I see that there are a couple of hands up. I'm sorry I wasn't paying attention.